record. Yeah.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, welcome everybody. Today we're going to go through a workshop on staff sufficiency. And this is based upon the feedback when we asked about what sort of aspects needed to be covered in our previous workshop or the workshop before. And we identified some key priority goals within this. And one of these was about staff sufficiency, looking not only about how we assess staff sufficiency, but also how we can plan for it as well, or plan for developing staff sufficiency. So we're going to start. First, I want to start by acknowledging the country from which I'm joining you all today. So I'm on the lands of the Burrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I recognise their continuing and ongoing connection and development of both the land, of water and culture, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I also welcome you all to recognise the lands that you're joining us from by posting in the chat space as well. And thank you for that. So the other thing, or the other person I really want to, or there's two other people I want to acknowledge, especially at this point. First and foremost is Mika. Mika's done a lot of work that we'll see demonstrated through the workshop today, but it's been great work that Mika's been doing. And it's been great that she's been able to do this, fitting around her wonderful holidays within a great country, which of course is New Zealand. I might be biased, but it's been great that she's saying so as well. But also Penny in her work as well to organise these sessions and make sure that we're all coordinated along this space as well. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to be looking at staff sufficiency, and what we're looking for as an outcome, or as 4 outcomes, is that you'll have a conversant understanding of staff sufficiency and its characteristics. So you'll be able to not only use the language, but you'll understand what that language is. You'll be able to apply the criteria to assess an institution's staff profile. We'll look at this through a fictitious institution today, but we're very confident that you'd have the sufficiency to assess this within your own institution as well. You'll also be able to prioritise the actions needed to address staff sufficiency gaps and also develop plans for continued staff sufficiency in an ongoing basis within both this fictitious institution that we'll look at, but also for other institutions as well. So to achieve these 4 outcomes, we're going to go through these 4 key sections. One, we're going to introduce the context. And within this space, we're going to focus on the standards, which is from TEXA 2021. We'll draw a connection to how this links into other accreditation, but largely we're going to focus on and use the language of TEXA for this process. We're then going to introduce the application space. And this is again a fictitious institution. And we've got fictitious program or degree, and we've got fictitious staff. And this is going to be the Academy of Tourism and Hospitality. We're then going to go through an assessment activity. And we're going to be looking at how the staff of the Academy of Tourism and Hospitality meet the standards or don't. And then our 4th stage is going to be looking at our actions. So this is going to be both focusing on our immediate actions as well as our plans for staff development within this space. So we're going to go through each of these 4 steps. Obviously, we're going to start with the start, which is going to be looking at the context. And for this process, it's important to note that it is important to demonstrate the standards, and particularly for staff sufficiency, because this means the difference between accreditation or not. And the reason why I think it's probably a relatively easy win, but it's not always as well demonstrated, is because with the processes and practices that are available around institutions, it can be something that's relatively easily implemented within these spaces. And through today's workshop, what we're looking to do is to sensitise your attention to the areas that need to be developed and how we can do that as well. But also, as Mika was saying in her pre-introduction talk, greater awareness about what evidence is going to be necessary to demonstrate these elements. So for this process, we'll start with the Higher Education Standards Framework, or the threshold standards as they're known. Now, in the chat space, I am going to post you a link to these standards. So this is on the TEXA website, and through here, you'll see at the top of the website, there's a link there on the 1st of July 2021, the Higher Education Standards Framework, Threshold Standards 2021. If you click on that link, it will take you through to the PDF file. And what I'd like you to do now, if possible, is to open that link and open that file, and then get to the standard 3.2 for staffing. Sorry, I'll just share that link again. All right, so again, there's the link to the TEXA standards, and we're just looking for standard 3.2 staffing. Has everybody been able to download the PDF file? Oh. All right. So within the standards, and particularly in standard 3.2, what it outlines is the requirements for the staffing of a degree program, or sorry, of a program of education or learning. And it looks at various aspects, particularly looks at the oversight and the leadership within the program. And it also looks at, importantly, about those involved in the teaching of a program. Now, very importantly, we'll see, for those familiar with AACSB, or other accreditation programs, EQUIS and the like, when they talk about staffing and sufficiency, we'll see a very similar language, but also see very similar expectations that exist across these spaces as well. So these higher education standards are generally, if you're demonstrating these, you'll also be able to demonstrate the requirements within AACSB and the like. So the ones that I want to focus on, though, is particularly about the staff with teaching responsibility or oversight of teaching within a program. And you'll see these in the standards there. And this is copied from them. So the staff with responsibilities for academic oversight and those with teaching and supervisory roles in courses or units of study are equipped for their roles, including having, and they need to have all three of these elements, knowledge of contemporary developments in the discipline or field, which is informed by continuing scholarship or research or advances in practice. And I'll come back to these elements shortly so that we can unpack what these specifically mean and also how we can demonstrate these. The second element is that they need to have skills in contemporary teaching, learning and assessment, contemporary teaching and learning and assessment principles relevant to the discipline, their role and the modes of delivery and the needs of particular student cohorts. And finally, they also need to have a qualification in a relevant discipline, at least one level higher than is awarded for the course of study, or equivalent relevant academic or professional or practice-based experience and expertise, except for staff supervising doctoral degrees, as they just are able to have a doctoral degree or equivalent research experience. Right. So these are the standards that we're going to focus on today, and we're going to be looking at unpacking these further to identify what potential evidence could be, and then also we'll look at the assessment of these within a staff profile, and we'll also look at how we could develop these elements. Does anyone have any questions at this point? All right, so now the application session. So now we're going to introduce this fictitious institution, which is the Academy of Tourism and Hospitality. Again, this is fictitious. This is in no way meant to represent or reflect any other institution. And it has been totally made up. And again, thank you very much to Mika for doing the work on this. All right, so we've got this institution, the Academy of Tourism and Hospitality. It's established in 2001, just at the turn of the century, and they offer 3 undergraduate degrees. They've got a Bachelor of Tourism, a Bachelor of Hospitality, and a Bachelor of Service Management. And for this accreditation round, they're looking to re-accredit the Bachelor of Tourism program. Now, their Bachelor of Tourism program has these 8 core modules. So in the first year, they've got the Principles of Tourism and Hospitality. They've got an Introduction to Tourism Management. In the second year, they've got Marketing for Tourism and Hospitality. They've got Event Planning and Management, Sustainable Tourism Practices. And then in year 3, they've got Tourist Experience Management, Innovation and Entrepreneurship in Tourism Destinations, and a capstone project in tourism and hospitality. Within this program, students also do other modules which sit in the other degrees which have recently been accredited. And so we're most concerned about these core modules within this degree for the purposes of this exercise. We will reintroduce these titles later, but largely we're going to be using these titles to note the connection with and the sufficiency of staff to teach in these broad areas. And we've got 5 staff that teach into these core modules. We've got Giles. He teaches in the year 1, Introduction to Tourism Management. He also teaches in the year 2, Event Planning and Management modules. Isabella, who teaches Sustainable Tourism Practices at year 2, and is also the leader of the capstone project in Tourism and Hospitality, the year 3 module. We have Sarah, who teaches the Innovation and Entrepreneurship in Tourism Destinations at year 3. We've got John, who teaches Principles of Tourism and Hospitality in year 1. And he also teaches the Tourist Experience Management at year 3. And then finally, we've got Emily in our teaching program, who teaches the Marketing for Tourism and Hospitality at 2nd year level. And very definitely it is a luxury, but also, as is often within many other institutions, these staff no doubt will teach in other degrees that sit in this program within this institution. So this is unlikely to be their full teaching load, but we will go with the assumption that they have sufficient time to teach these units within their loading. So we won't go on the assumption that this is all they're teaching within this space. So with that as a context, and again, we'll reintroduce you to these staff in much more detail and those units and the connections between them. What we're looking for now is to assess these staff as to meeting the standards for the units that they have responsibility for. And so what I'm going to go through now is some of the key elements that we might be looking for when we're thinking about those 3 standard elements. Excuse me. So the first one was about contemporary discipline developments. So this is about knowledge of contemporary developments in the discipline or field, which is informed by continuing scholarship or research or advances in practice. So key aspects that we're looking for in this context is contemporary development. So we're talking about currency. And generally we might have a time frame that indicates currency. And this might be within the last 3 to 5 years to make sure that we've got this evidence of recency or the contemporary developments within this space. The other element here is about the continuing. So this is ongoing engagement in scholarship or research or in advances of practice. Now, TEXA has been actually quite good. They've recently released guidelines on what scholarship is, because there's been quite a bit of confusion and or difference within the demonstrations of what scholarship is or what it means within this space. And we can have scholarship as in scholarship within a discipline or field area. And we can also have scholarship within a teaching or education area. Now, very importantly for this first standard, this is about scholarship within the discipline or field. Okay. So scholarship as compared to research is generally our engagement with research environments and or research activities, but it may not necessarily be the actual undertaking or leadership of research projects and or the publications of high-level research outputs within that space. But we're still looking to see evidence of active engagement within those activities to determine scholarship. Advances in practice are generally going to be determined by an active engagement within a professional environment of a high level within, again, the area of the discipline or field. And again, I just want to re-emphasize that we're looking for here is that continuing or ongoing nature of those engagements within scholarship or research or in advances in practice. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions on this? And also, Naomi, did you want to raise any other points here into interpreting the standard?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just interesting that we recruit people based on their discipline expertise and then throw them in the deep end with regards to all this when it comes to our academic staff, maybe unless we're in the Faculty of Education, basically. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. So sorry, did anyone else have any questions or comments to make on the discipline developments?
Glenn, it's just interesting that what they say about what doesn't represent sufficient evidence of scholarship. So on page 3 under point 3 of the guidance notes. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And we'll come to some of that later as well, particularly when we go through that application. But I think that that's really informative.
Yeah, actually, I must admit, I do. I'll turn my video on so I don't hide. I'm late to this whole scholarship of teaching and learning debate, but then I also have 3 education degrees and did my PhD in reflection and experiential learning. According to TEXA, that's irrelevant that I did that.
Yep.
But in terms of it wasn't current in terms of it was done quite a few years ago. But yeah, so it's quite interesting. And the whole concept of reflecting on your practice is like, that's what my whole PhD was about. That's what I did, was reflecting on current practice and how, people facilitated experiential learning.
Yeah.
And you sort of go, this is stuff that was happening 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just note here that, and we'll talk about education practice in the next criteria, but within this one here, this is very much, and this is very much aligned with TEXA and with that scholarship element there, this is about the discipline developments. So we'll touch on the... I
get that, but when you look at a lot of the stuff around, teaching and learning, it's only, it's like, you can't have been trained and still be actually active in thinking about, your teaching. Because that must have stopped when you stop formal learning. Yeah, sorry, Nika.
Yeah, there's a really good discussion paper put forward by TEXA, and I've popped it in the link. And it's you can see that it's really quite encompassing about what scholarship, and what constitutes demonstrations of outputs or outcomes arising from scholarship. So if you use, say, your PhD knowledge and you've applied that in a current context within the degree form, within what you're doing, within your institution, that counts because it is informed. Even though, like, you know, you may have had, because that's the sort of contemporary thing they're looking at. It's a really interesting read. Well, I think it is.
I just want to
I've
distinguish.
downloaded it.
Yeah, I just want to distinguish here that within this criterion or this specific standard, we're talking about discipline or field knowledge.
Discipline, yeah.
Rather than education or SOTL within this space. And then Nikki's posted a question, what do we mean by discipline or field? Generally, this is going to be determined by the teaching that is being delivered. So if we've got a tourism unit, then we'll be anticipating that this expertise or this knowledge of contemporary developments will be in tourism. If it's going to be a mathematics module that you're teaching, then we'd expect that this knowledge of contemporary developments will be in the discipline of mathematics. So it's going to be determined by what the subject is that is being taught within this space. But one of the points that we want to make that distinction of is that this one here is about discipline and field knowledge. And the next criteria, or the next standard, is going to be about education. So what are we looking for as evidence here for contemporary discipline developments? Now, it's very important that this is in the discipline or field. So this could be at a very soft end, and generally this is not as acceptable as it might be, that a membership of a research association and active engagement in it, and it's important to note that is sort of a indication of scholarship activity, but it's pretty soft and you'd generally want to be going beyond that. So other evidence of scholarship would be, for example, active and research review processes, being on a journal, doing reviews for journals, for conferences and the likes, undertaking a high degree of research, again, in the discipline or field, presenting at conferences, and then for more of the research, active and leading research projects and publications in formal research outlets. So book chapters, journal articles and the like within that space. So that's the sort of things that we'd be looking for to demonstrate scholarship or research. Then for advances in practice, so again, you could determine your awareness or knowledge of contemporary developments through either scholarship or research or in advances in practice. This here might be through membership of a professional association and active engagement in this. Again, this is a pretty soft indication. More likely, it would be better demonstrated by professional appointments and ensuring that these are at a high level as well. So it's not just working within a sector or an industry, it needs to make sure that it's demonstrated this at a high level to particularly be equivalent to what we're expecting of the scholarship and research space. Has anyone got any other thoughts or inputs on this?
Glenn, I just wanted to provide some feedback. About 2 weeks ago, we were going through the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning framework for potentially getting ACSB accreditation, and this conversation came up, and they were quite happy with some of the metrics. And then the follow-up question was, is everyone in the discipline doing the same, or are there a few superstars and the rest are laggards? And is the discipline reflected across all the majors in the business school? So it's almost as if you can't just have like some people winning the Oscars and the rest just don't get nominations. You almost have to have a collegial team effort to demonstrate this discipline developments. And I think from some of the conversations and observations, that's what it will take moving forward.
Yep, very much, Aaron, and that's definitely what we'll see in the next part of, or in the activity or the application, is that it is about the teaching team. It's not about an individual within this space, and it's about an institution creating that context for it as well. Any other thoughts or comments?
No, I'll just add on to say, like, we've already done this before, so we did have many of those questions answered for us, and it is within our realm of understanding that it's supposed to be at least like once yearly, and that you need to produce an output that has traceability effect to and contribution to something. So very much so, like Glenn just said before, us sitting in the session today, for example, not for Glenn, but for us, for the attendees, means zero scholarship. It's a good PD, but zero scholarship output. For Glenn, however, it could actually mean a great output in scholarship. So one of the bigger things that we had to really incorporate in focus on how do we, I suppose, quantify and measure the output throughout, let's just say 12 months period. And that was probably the bigger hurdle there, because, you know, you really need to then put some mechanisms in place to follow through and see that whatever the person has done outside of their typical scope did yield some sort of change in addition to the business and whatnot.
Yeah, and that's another great point. And I just want to highlight 2 points there. One is that broadly, these sort of things need to be within the typical scope. And that's really where the standards are, what the standards are requiring. The second element, that this session is important for you and for me, but it's not important for this criterion. So this isn't about developing a contemporary discipline knowledge or field knowledge. This is about the educational practice. So that doesn't fit within this standard, it fits into the next standard, and in which case it does become important as both a point of your active engagement, but also within this space. Yeah. Which makes a great segue into the second standard, which is about contemporary teaching principles. So again, what we're needing for staff to have, and as Aaron's already highlighted, this needs to be evidenced across the staff team, not just by individuals within it, is that they have skills in contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles relevant to the discipline, their role in the modes of delivery and the needs for particular student content cohorts. And again, it's important to emphasize the need for contemporary and for relevancy for the principles that cover this teaching, learning and assessment. And so generally what we're looking for is that these relevant principles might be evidenced through your engagement or the team's engagement with educational training, through educational scholarship or research. It might be evidenced through obtaining educational fellowships, and it might be demonstrated by having an educational qualification. Yeah. Linking back to Tracy's point earlier, that a qualification is an excellent indicator here, but the other element is that we need to make sure is demonstrated as the contemporary. So keeping up to date, which might mean, as Tracy has noted, undertaking or engaging with educational training or some other activity on an annual basis within that space. It's very important to note that experience as an educator is not demonstration of contemporary teaching principles. We've probably all heard of some staff that have been teaching for years and years and years, but what they're actually demonstrating within that is definitely not contemporary, and it's probably not even good practice or good principles that they're demonstrating. So there is definitely looking for more than just experience as an educator within this space. So again, I want to draw that distinction between a discipline and field knowledge, which is the previous standard, and this one here, which is about our education. And again, the SOTL, or the Scholarship of Learning and Teaching, is a great demonstration in here in this standard, but it's generally not going to be a good demonstration of discipline and field knowledge. Any other comments on this? Naomi, I'll keep on calling on you because you're a TEXA expert as well.
Nothing to add, Glenn. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, the third criterion then is a qualification in a relevant discipline. And there's the other opportunity here. So we have a qualification in a relevant discipline, at least one level higher than is awarded for the course of study, or equivalent, relevant academic or professional or practice-based experience. So it's not necessary to have the qualification, but if we don't have the qualification, we definitely need to demonstrate these other aspects or one of these other aspects. And importantly, that this needs to be demonstrating expertise at the level higher than the course that's being awarded. So importantly, I want to re-emphasize here that is this relevant academic experience might be, for example, through research or a demonstration of research at the higher level. Professional or practice-based is generally going to be through employment. And again, for these elements, we're generally going to be looking for contemporary aspects within that employment aspect. When we're drawing for equivalence, we're generally going to be looking for relatively contemporary elements there. Crucial, it's at least one level higher. And during the application, during the assessment activity, we'll engage with this in a bit more nuance as well. So to the more specific criteria, we're looking for a qualification in the discipline or field. Yeah. And it has to be at least a level higher to that being taught. Again, the experience is generally going to be demonstrated by high-level contemporary or relatively current professional appointments, and generally we'll be looking at senior management position. And I'll put management in our inverted commas there, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a managerial role, but it would definitely need to be a senior role, again, within that discipline or field area. Within that space. Has anyone got any questions on this one? Okay, all right. We now, assuming you've got a good understanding of those, and again, we'll give you guidance in the next stage, we're going to start then going through a process where we're going to assess the staff in their teaching of the units. So we've got a table and we'll put you into 2 breakout rooms. And what I'm looking for you to do is to assess the staff for the specific modules that they're teaching across those 3 criteria. So assessing John against his contemporary discipline developments, contemporary teaching principles, and the qualification or equivalent experience for principles in tourism and hospitality. And we'll see later down also in tourism, tourist experience management. Now, it's important that we're assessing each of these staff against the module that they're in charge of, all right? Because again, coming back to Nikki's question, that discipline or field may change dependent upon the nature of the unit. And we're going to go for relatively specific based, thinking about the field or the discipline based on the titles of the unit. Yeah. So if we've got an introduction to tourism management, we'll say that's in tourism. So we'll be looking for Giles, for example, to have discipline or knowledge of contemporary discipline developments in tourism. Right. Everybody's okay with that? All right.
You mean, sorry, Glenn, one question. It means that if you have the subject like principle of tourism and hospitality, it means either tourism or hospitality for the first one?
So we would generally hope that they would have both, but if they've at least got one and some indications of insights of the other, that would be good. Should we base on the course name, like say Bachelor of the Tourism Management or Bachelor of Hospitality Management, or for example, in this case, event planning and management? Would you expect that they have a qualification in planning or something? In events.
Event, yeah.
Yep, so it's on the module, yep, rather than the degree.
Thanks.
Yep. All right. So we're going to set you out into breakout rooms. As we noted before, we're asking you to assess each of the staff against the standards. And again, as Andrew's already highlighted, we're going to pay special attention to the specific module they're teaching. What I'm wanting you to do is to use traffic lights, red, orange or green. So green is good, orange is questionable, red is bad. And to also include notes as to the evidence that's been provided. Now, for this process, Mika has done a wonderful lot of work. And I'm just going to post it into the chat space. Right. And before I send you out into breakout rooms, just to confirm that everybody has got access to that folder now. Right. What you should see there is you should see a basic outline of the degree, those core units that we've noted. It will have a CV for each of the staff members. And I'll shortly put you into breakout rooms, which will then mean if you're in the group 1, you should use the group 1 Excel sheet or Google sheet. If you're in group 2, you should use the group 2 Google sheet. Yeah. So everybody's now has access to the Google form.
Mine seems to have gone through to the assessment sheet. Do we need to just backward through the file to get to the right one, or?
I'll just share what we're seeing, Glenn.
All right, I'll stop sharing.
Share screen.
Yeah,
This is what the
I see
link.
what I've done.
Yeah,
I
that's what
see
the link
I've
is.
done. No, I gave you the wrong link. Thank you for picking that up.
But no CV there. Yeah.
Yeah, this link.
Glenn, is this something also that you could do sort of RPL or RCC?
Sorry, recognition of prior learning. And
Yeah, that sort of process, or a portfolio recognition of current competency. So where you actually interview the person, have a discussion with the person, rather than having a CV, that ticks a box. That you could have that sort of exploratory interview with them to unpack some of that experience.
Yep, by all means you can have that, but generally when you're making the submission to TEXA, or at least within the TEXA situation, you're needing to submit the CVs of the staff. So part of this is going to be a process of making sure that the staff have broadly a standardized CV, which is demonstrating the evidence related to the specific criteria. But definitely in the appointment process, and particularly the assigning of staff to specific modules, by all accounts, it can definitely be going through that process of recognising prior learning, which is broadly going to be obviously that professional experience at an equivalent or higher level. That's going to be within discipline or field. Yeah. So the folder link works now?
Yep.
Yep.
All
right.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to then put into breakout rooms. All right, and they will be on your screen now. We're going to set you away to do this, and we're going to give you about 20 minutes or so to do this. So we'll give you 30 minutes, and I'll drop in at about quarter an hour just to see how things are going. All right.
Okay. All right. See you there.
Mm-hmm. All right, welcome back, everybody. So how did you find that experience?
Contentious. I think Tracy's idea about being able to talk to people rather than trying to discern it from a CV is probably a little bit helpful, but also it really depends on your institution. We had Anastasia from a private institution in our group, and she just wanted to read everything because she's just been through the process and found stuff that would not be accepted there, whereas we're all like, yep, that's green, yep, that's green. So yeah, I think it depends on the context a little bit.
Yep. Anybody else's reflections? Andrew, you were saying before we came back, or Nikki, sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, following from Naomi there, I wish Anastasia was with us now, because we had the two perspectives, which was really interesting to hear from, what they're doing right now at Kaplan. And obviously they're seriously by the book, hard on this. Whereas I can speak a little bit from experience at UQ. When we've interviewed people, we can see what's on paper, what's required, but then in the interview process, you can, thread things out, and often we will go green because we like that person and we can see the fit. So it's a little bit of, I don't know if you call it subjectivity or context. I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Andrew, on to you.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting exercise, and we discuss a lot. We hesitant to give the red light because we think that there is no way to get back. We don't want to burn the bridge, and we would expect that we give yellow and request for more supporting evidence. For example, research and other things, they don't have the years and other, so we are not quite sure that it is a contemporary or not.
Yep. So I think all of those points are really important to note and to vocalize. And I just want to draw our attention to three elements within this. So what we were looking at in this process was looking at the standards. So these are the standards that the Australian government has set for all higher education institutions. And so these are the minimum that need to be required to be demonstrated by staff that have responsibility within the teaching or the oversight of the teaching within the modules of a degree. Now, on top of those, institutions such as Kaplan can have standards which expect more of staff, right? But these are the minimum ones that we're looking to be demonstrated for a course to be accredited within that space.
Yeah.
The second element I just want to come back to, and this was a point that was raised by Tracy, as Naomi noted, is about this conversation with staff. And very definitely we can have these conversations with staff, but unfortunately, generally through this accreditation process, the accreditors or the review panel is not having conversations with staff on an individual by individual basis. Instead, they're looking at the evidence that is supplied. And so it's very important that the CVs that are supplied and a relatively formulaic presentation of these are demonstrating the evidence which is going to support the reviewer to say that, yes, you are demonstrating the standard. Then comes back to Andrew's point. Within this process, what we're looking to do is to sensitize our attention to the points that need to be demonstrated, how they are demonstrated, and importantly, how they can be clearly demonstrated within such an environment as a CB, so that when we're guiding our colleagues through this process or our team through this process, that we can identify, well, this is what we need to be making sure we're demonstrating. This is a way that we can demonstrate it more clearly so that the reviewer can come through and say, tick, you're demonstrating this element. So we're not giving, I suppose, we're not burning those bridges within this case. More what we're looking to do in this environment is to sensitize our attention to the key points that are looking to demonstrate, how they demonstrate, and what evidence would be expected for that demonstration within this space. So what I think is also going to be very useful, because I've had a look at your spreadsheets to have a look at what ratings that you've given the different teaching staff and the modules they're related to. And I'll soon go through my evaluation of those staff based upon the CVs as well. But what I want to draw attention to here, and this is, Nikki, your point as to subjectivity, generally what we're looking for here is moving away from that term of subjectivity to expertise, and we're looking at expert evaluation within this space. And largely our evaluation can and has got the capability to read beyond the explicit, but generally what we'll see within this environment, it's very important for the explicit to be made. So it's up to the role of the institution that they explicitly demonstrate these things within this space as well. Yeah. So what did it look like? This is before my color coding. Is that we've got a number of no's here, but importantly, what we've also got is a number of elements which may be a yes, but aren't a yes just yet. And particularly these relate to the dates on the conferences, the publications, etc., that people have engaged with or the different staff have engaged with. And therefore, it sort of demonstrates the importance to make sure that these dates are there, because that can be a very easy and clear signal as to contemporary. And it can also be a good signal as to ongoing, because a lot of these are time dependent. And this comes back to a point that Aaron was making during one of the breakouts that I was visiting, is to what is a time frame that would indicate contemporary within this space. I'm relatively, I suppose, generous within my interpretation there as to about the last 5 years. I know that others would probably be looking within the last 3 years. So we're thinking about the last 3 to 5 years would be an indication of contemporary. But in saying that, even with that element of contemporary, quite often these standards also have the expectation of ongoing. So even though there is something that is there, we're not looking at these things as a one-off. We're looking as an ongoing demonstration of those standards within this space. So what does this look like when we get our traffic lights involved? Unfortunately, it doesn't look that good at this point. And Andrew, we're not looking at this as a burning of bridges for the staff. More, we're looking at this as a point where, as you noted, is to potentially identify, is there other evidence which is just not available within those documentations? And or are there opportunities where we can help and support staff to be able to reach the requirements of these standards within these spaces? So particularly in the orange, where we've got the conferences and publications with no dates, that it could be easily rectified by including the dates of the conferences and publications where this the team was attending to. So this is for John, for Giles, for Emily, that they, if they had the dates there, then potentially that would change those to full greens within those spaces. Particularly in the areas of the no's, those are more challenging, but again, they are addressable within this space. So again, I want to just highlight across these 3 criteria. So when we're looking at contemporary discipline developments, we're looking at knowledge within the discipline as indicated by the subject within this space. And it can be demonstrated by scholarship, it can be demonstrated by research, and it can be demonstrated by practice within this space. So it can be either of those elements which are going to demonstrate these. For contemporary teaching principles, what we're looking for here is teaching and education. And particularly what we're looking for is not just experience in teaching, but we're looking for those things that may give us indications. So here, for example, John has been engaged with conferences and publications on the educational practice. We've got Sarah, who's got a fellowship in education, recognition of her practice, and we've got Giles with a qualification. So these here are good indicators of that engagement within here. And it might be that Emily, Isabella, have also engaged with training and education and the like. It's just that it's not on their CV, so we can't interpret it from there. And then for qualification or equivalent experience, here I've been potentially generous, and I'll highlight this again for John. But what we can see here is, again, making sure that we've got in-discipline or in-field qualifications here. Coming back to John, for the principles of tourism and hospitality, the standard expects that the staff would have a qualification at a level above the qualification being taught. All right. So John is teaching within a Bachelor of Tourism, which would mean that he would be expected to have a qualification at a level higher than that. It may be, and hence why the green, or maybe the generosity here, it may be that this first year program is also part of a diploma program within this institution. And if that's an exit degree or exit program, so a diploma in tourism, then he would have a qualification a level higher than what he's being taught at.
You
because
didn't tell us we could make assumptions like that, Glenn.
I know, and that's why I'm being clear here that this might be a generous element here.
We actually looked at his industry experience for that bit.
Yep. And so, Naomi, did you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So for John in particular, we had a look. He's been working in the Marriott or something from memory since 1983, or like a very long time.
Yeah.
In a middle management role, and we decided that that was industry experience equivalent for a intro year 1 unit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. So so that was good. Oh, that's great. And indeed, you can definitely demonstrate this here with equivalent experience. I'll just highlight that generally we're looking for that experience to be contemporary. And I recall that his experience in that space ended at the beginning of the century. So
But
yeah.
isn't he currently, didn't it say till 2023 that he's working
No,
at?
they mentioned 2002, 83 to 2002. I just checked it. I thought that we thought that it come to the current, huh?
Oh yeah,
But,
maybe I read
yeah.
the date wrong. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought that 2022, but in fact 2002.
Yeah.
Glenn,
So-
you get the point then.
yeah, so within that space, very definitely we could include that industry experience within there. But what we'd generally also be looking for is that was a contemporary industry experience within that space. Yeah. So what we're beginning to see, or what we're beginning to see demonstrated here, is some of the nuance that we're looking for that can be demonstration or evidence across the criteria, but also the specific things that we'd generally be looking for these staff to demonstrate within their CVs as well. That then links us into...
Sorry, maybe for one question, Glenn, sorry to interrupt. I look at the case of Isabella, and Isabella actually teaching at the moment sustainable tourism management, and I see here you both for teaching principles you give them no for both. So Isabella, if you look at CV, professional experience, she's teaching sustainable tourism management, and yeah, I think that it's green for the teaching principle.
Yep. So, and
Is that-
that's a great question within that space. So again, generally what I'm very conscious of is that experience of teaching is not a full demonstration of being aware of the contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles. And again, I'll just re-emphasize that point, that just because somebody's teaching doesn't mean that that teaching is necessarily evidence of their awareness of the principles that should guide this and the practice of doing that within that space. And so generally what we're looking for within this is instead training within education and teaching and learning. We're looking for qualifications or fellowships or research or SOTL basically within the teaching and learning space to demonstrate those elements. So just draw that distinction that teaching experience in and of itself is generally not going to be sufficient to demonstrate the knowledge of contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles.
That's tough, huh? That's very tough. I remember that when they assess this, they normally request for the learning and higher education in learning and teaching or something like that. Yeah.
Yep. So again, that's what Sarah has. So she's got a HEA fellowship, and that there would be good, just a good evidence of that. Again, demonstrating the contemporary nature of it.
My personal questions only. Now, normally at the moment when we assess our current staff, we look at postgrad certificate in learning and teaching. We need to cover the teaching discipline, because most of the higher educations now require for it, and then is it considered meet the requirement?
Yes. So again, Giles here has got a graduate certificate. I think in was that in higher education or academic practice, which is the equivalent of those. So and yes, that there would be sufficient. Again, expecting that to be contemporary.
Glenn, On that note of contemporary fellowship, yes, you noted that Sarah's got hers in 2022. So what if the fellowship was attained in, say, 2005? Very few get to principal fellow. I mean, you can count with the numbers in each institution. So
Exactly.
I suppose you want to see that continuous evolution of contemporary teaching principles, professional development in other cases like grad certs, diplomas, but some of them can come at a cost. And yeah, you could go with like citation and teaching awards, for example. But yeah, it's these ones that I think will be challenging to demonstrate ongoing when you've attained that high level of teaching fellowship, maybe like 5 or 10 years ago.
So that's a great question within that space, Aaron. So what we may see is, as you said, that someone's got a fellowship in 2005. So it's getting close to 20 years since they've got that level of recognition for their sense. And what we're looking for is that contemporaneous nature. So what we'd be anticipating is that there'd be some other evidence of training or learning within the educational space. There may be some qualification. Now, again, it's not all of these. It can be one of these that's demonstrated. It may be some high-level recognition. It might be research or scholarship within learning and teaching. So it can be any of these elements. So training is a relatively easy one to demonstrate or to engage with and demonstrate. So if you're attending or your institution has a teaching or learning or an education workshops, attending those would be a good demonstration of this, because we're keeping up to date with contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles. And if we're regularly attending these, then that would demonstrate ongoing. Yeah. So there's not the need to demonstrate all of these at the very highest level of a qualification and getting a qualification every 5 years, or to achieve a high level of the fellowship every 5 years. But we're definitely looking for some level of engagement and ongoing engagement within these criterion. Does that clarify for you, Aaron?
Yes, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions in regards to this? All right. Then on to actions. So I'm going to break these actions up into immediate actions and then for longer term actions. And again, what we're looking to do through this process is take this as a formative view, so that we're developing our staff to meet those standards and potentially even to exceed those standards. So first, we're prioritising our actions, and our immediate actions are generally going to be related to alignment and oversight responsibilities. And I noted that I think it was group 2 might have already identified an alignment opportunity. Which group identified the opportunity to change a module?
Yeah.
Teacher? Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We considered throwing some into different. Yeah.
So if we'll just do a quick look at this. And then if we change the alignment, we can see we've got a lot more green immediately. So if we swap Isabella and Giles over, so Isabella, the events expert, is actually teaching events, we've got 2 more greens there. And then Giles taking sustainable tourism practices, given his research, we've got greens there. Yeah. And also as Sarah teaches the tourist experience management instead of John, then we've got a few more greens there as well. So just by looking at alignment of teaching staff to the discipline or field that they're teaching in, can provide some of these answers. But we can see that we haven't solved everything here. And again, what we're talking here, these are very short-term actions within that space. The next one then is about oversight. So alignment is one way that we can address these. The other one is oversight. And what we mean by oversight is the person that is in charge of the unit is meeting all of the criteria within that module within this. Now, for oversight arrangements, again, thinking of very short term, this can create in this case, a huge workload for a small number of people. So we can see Giles is basically teaching, or at least in charge of everything. But we can also see that this here might be a short-term thing that we do until we're able to get the other staff up to standards on the other elements here. Now, for Giles here, it might mean that what we would say in our terminology, the chief examiner, whilst the other staff that are still there are still teaching the module, but they're under Giles' oversight or under his supervision within this space. Yeah. And we can see also that when some of these modules, that Giles is not going to be sufficient by himself. And in fact, we need the collaboration. So for example, for marketing, Emily's the one with the marketing expertise, but Giles has the recent research and the education qualification. And so it needs to be the combination of the two of them to make sure that we're getting the green boxes all the way across. And again, for event planning and management.
Yeah.
All right. So this one here is very much short term, and definitely recognizing that this would be potential, well, it would be a huge workload change for the people that need to step into these oversight positions. So more what we're looking for is not to create the extra work for a small number of people, but what we're looking for is the whole team to develop, which then takes us on to staff sufficiency planning. And again, we're looking at planning across these three areas, and importantly, all of these three areas. So everyone, linking back to Aaron's earlier point, everyone in the teaching team needs to demonstrate all of these criteria if they have got oversight of it teaching within a degree program. All right. And I'll just highlight here that if we've got, for example, a teaching associate or a casual staff member, it's not necessary that they have all of these elements if they're being supervised by somebody that does have these. So again, within the Monash context, for example, our chief examiners would need to demonstrate all three of these, but we may have teaching associates or tutors which do not demonstrate all of these, but they're within and guided by and supervised by the person that does have these elements. So we need to make sure that those staff with oversight have contemporary discipline or knowledge of contemporary discipline or field developments, knowledge of contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles, and qualification in a relevant discipline or equivalence through the professional or other academic practice. So again, what we're broadly looking for is our staff to demonstrate these elements that we're wanting to see as evidence. So for contemporary or evidence of knowledge of contemporary discipline or field developments, we're looking for, if they're looking to demonstrate this in the scholarship or research, that they're active in research and research review processes, or they're undertaking a high degree by research, or they're presenting at research conferences, or engaged in publications and formal research outlets. Alternately, if they're taking the path to demonstrate this by advances in practice, then we'll be looking for them to have a professional appointment, and that appointment to be at a high level. Importantly, that appointment will be in the discipline or field in which the module is being delivered. Yeah. So what we're wanting, or what I'm wanting you to think about, is that these are the sort of things that we're looking to provide opportunities for staff to have, and not only support them in achieving these, but also even requiring our staff to engage in these to demonstrate these elements. So there's the first standard. The second one then is in contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles. So this here can be demonstrated through undertaking educational training. It could be through undertaking education scholarship or research. It could be by demonstrating education fellowship or an education qualification. Again, as we talked about previously, it doesn't need to demonstrate all of these elements. It can be demonstrating just one of these elements. But again, I just re-emphasize that experience as an educator is generally not seen as sufficient to demonstrate the contemporary knowledge of teaching, learning, and assessment principles. And then finally, a qualification in a relevant discipline. Again, this can be demonstrated by qualification or experience. It needs to be in the discipline or field, and it has to be a level higher than that being taught. Or if going down the experience or the equivalence path, then again, it has to be a high-level professional appointment. And again, that senior managerial roles are generally what's going to be expected, and appreciating that it has to be in the discipline or field, and it has to be contemporary to demonstrate the equivalence within this space. So with those, sorry, Andrew?
May have one questions here, which is very practical question actually. Now we are having the postgraduate program, and we have the graduate certificate, which is normally level 7. Then the staff for this one, you can, let's say he teaching marketing, and the staff is at MBA, which is level 8.
Yep.
Would it be acceptable?
Yep, as long as marketing is included within the staff member's MBA, and would hopefully be a focus of the MBA, then that would generally be sufficient.
So if you, for bachelor degree, you have just for postgrad, for bachelor degree, you have a year 1, which is more like diploma, which is AQ up level 5.
Yep.
Is it possible for somebody with the bachelor degree teaching that?
Yep.
Like the case of John actually in our actually the practices. John is eligible for that.
So John would be eligible for that. And again, on the element, or what the assumption would be, is that the diploma would be seen as an exit program. So there is an opportunity to have that, or it is an exit degree. So if it's just an element within a degree, then on a strict reading of the standards, we would generally expect John to have a qualification higher than a bachelor's. Yep.
Yeah.
But if that unit was part of a diploma, i.e. a level 5 or level 6, then having a level 7 qualification is okay.
Thank you.
All right. So with this then, I'm going to send you out into a breakout room. And what we're going to, actually, we don't even need a breakout room for this then, is we're going to be looking for a development plan for each of these 3 aspects. Now, this is going to be an institutional plan. And this is it's going to cover all staff. And again, we're wanting to emphasize the contemporary and ongoing. Within this, I want you to think about what would be compliance, i.e. what's a need to have, versus what might need to be, or what might be incentivized, i.e. nice to have. That is what is going to be needed to be demonstrated for all staff to meet the minimum standards, versus incentivized, which might be things that demonstrate above those standards. And again, appreciating that institutions may have higher expectations as well. So again, this is for all 3 areas: the contemporary discipline, or knowledge of contemporary discipline developments, knowledge of contemporary teaching, principles, qualification in a relevant discipline area. So what I want you to do is we'll go back into the Google folder, or into that Google file. And what you should see there is a Group 1 Staff Sufficiency Planning page. And what I've got there is a table, and it's got 3 columns in it. We've got 3 tables, 1 for each of these areas, and we've got 3 columns. It's going to be the sort of evidence which is indicated, or that I've indicated on the slides, but it also has space for you to think about what might be additional evidence or other or alternate evidence that could be demonstrated within that space. And then to also identify what's going to be necessary or needing to have versus what's nice for staff to demonstrate within that space. So what I will do, I'll stop sharing this, and I'll actually start sharing So what we're looking to do is for each of these three headings: contemporary discipline developments, contemporary teaching principles, and qualification in a relevant discipline, is to identify what, importantly, the plan would be for the needed demonstration, and if there's something that's nice to have, what the plan might be for the institution to do that. So, for example, if you're looking at presentation of research at conferences, and you identify that that's nice to have, then what would be the plan for the institution? And that might be, for example, providing financial support for people to attend conferences. If it's publications and formal research outlets, again, just as an example, it might be something that you see as nice to have rather than need to have, and therefore it might be rewarded. So it might be a certificate, or it might be an amount of money or something that's given to the staff member that does publish in those spaces. All right. So what I want you guys to do is to think about what would be the plans for this institution, for the staff to both develop the needed elements, but also the nice elements as well. Before you do that, is there any questions that you have?
I wonder what size conference. So for a research conference, for example, and this is something I've been wondering, there's lots of research conferences out there that are not fantastic, as in they're not supported by industry, they're not long-standing, it's just sometimes they're just money spinners. There's that element. And there's also conferences which universities organize themselves, sort of like internal conferences, which can sometimes be really quite good. They're not the money spinners. But say a university decides to hold its own one-day research conference on anything in particular, like marketing, say marketing, a marketing research conference across any of their disciplines that they are offering. Would that be valuable? Like, you wouldn't be looking at peer-reviewed, well, it might be peer-reviewed, but it wouldn't be double-blind peer-reviewed. It wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't tick all those research boxes, but it'd be engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be useful?
So the quick answer is yes, that would be useful. And I'll just re-emphasize that we're not looking for staff to demonstrate all of these things. Even one of these things would generally be sufficient as long as it's being demonstrated in an ongoing manner. So the attendance at a seminar, and I'll draw that distinction, that internal we'll call seminar versus a conference which is external, can be very useful. Generally, that there's going to engage, as you say, staff with the awareness of contemporary developments in the disciplinary field, which is good. That's what the standard is expecting. And maybe that's something that the institution can formalise by having a research seminar series that exists throughout the year, for example, having a presentation once a month, which staff engage with. The thing that's going to be important, though, is that there's a demonstration that this is discipline or field specific. All right. So if it's just a general seminar series, there's going to need some demonstration that this is informing them of discipline or field. The second element, and generally what we're anticipating, is that they'd have some more role as rather than just an audience member, that there would be some role being played with. Generally, but again, the active engagement, as we see at the top there, the engagement within these sort of things is okay. It's just a bit soft. But so you might enter here that there'll be institutional research seminar series as a new idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
When it, I just follow up with the Mika. Now, let's say that if the institutions organize the professional development workshop on authentic assessment, will it be counted as the contemporary teachings discipline, or the organized workshop on the blended delivery or Gen AI assessment, something like that, which is the 2 hour maybe? Would it be considered updated already?
Yep. So that there would come under education training. So yes, that there would be appropriate, and if it's on a relatively regular basis, and again, regular doesn't have to be all the time, but as long as it's able to be demonstrated, then that there would be a great opportunity. So here it might be if it's needed, which it sounds like it might be, then it might be that the institution has formalized these training activities maybe once a semester or something like that.
So it needs to be regular, it's not ad hoc.
So again, I'll emphasize it needs to be formalized rather than necessarily. So the degrees of regularity might be 2 times a year, and that they might be seen as regular. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop recording so that you guys can. Oh, sorry, Andrew.
Yeah, no. Can I just pick up on Andrew's question and just follow through that? This is the grey space where I get lost in the distinction between scholarly activity and professional development. So using Andrew's example, is there something about what Andrew said then that made that use that led you to say that falls under the education training thing as opposed to being professional development, just so I can get it straight in my head?
Yeah, so so within Andrew's example, he's talking about workshop on authentic assessment.
Yep.
So I would say that there's about developing our knowledge of contemporary teaching, learning and assessment principles.
Yep.
Yep. So it's not about learning about the discipline of tourism, hospitality or events. It's about the knowledge of contemporary teaching principles within that space.
Yep.
And so that's why I'd put it under this, a demonstration of this standard compared to within the discipline or field knowledge within that space. And then if we're calling this professional development or not, is sort of, that's just a different name for the broader activity. But again, within this space, as linked into the previous one, we'd want people to be active participants within the training opportunities for us to demonstrate this as well.
So okay, so and the reason for my question is that we we often are fighting little battles with our Office of Teaching and Learning as to whether it's part of scholarly activity or whether it's not. And I reckon they would say that this is not part of scholarly activity, that TEXA would not recognise it. Do we, having attended, say, Andrew's training session on authentic assessment, do we then have to be able to demonstrate that we took that back to the classroom for TEXA to credit it?
So thank you for that further clarification there. So I would not say that the participation in that sort of professional development workshop, to use your language, on authentic assessment is scholarly or research activity.
Yep.
Again, the scholarship or research is generally taking an active role in investigating something else rather than necessarily just gaining new skills or capability from an activity.
Yep.
Within that space. So this would be something, again, that would put within this space, and potentially I've misled with this title here at the top, and we should have
okay,
up there just to distinguish that from that space. I'll even add another one in here. Yeah. So to I would be agreeing to say that the attendance at Andrew's authentic assessment workshop would not be evidence of scholarly activity. Instead, that would be about capability development.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
All right. All right. So I'm going to pause the recording. Got to a good place. So broadly through this process, what we're recognizing is that obviously staff need to demonstrate the minimum standards at the very least, and obviously have to demonstrate our institutional standards if they're above those by the TEXA. Within this, it's very important for our institution to provide the mechanisms to support staff and provide the opportunity for staff to complete or to achieve these standards within their work for their work. So the risk, again, as we noted at the very beginning, is not meeting accreditation, which can be devastating for any institution. So it's going to be important that the institution has policies or has programs or has plans which can support staff to ensure that they've got ongoing contemporary knowledge of developments in the discipline or field, that they've got ongoing contemporary knowledge and skills within teaching, learning and assessment principles, and that they've got a qualification in a relevant discipline that is higher, and if not, that they've got an assessment process for equivalence. And again, that we're looking for that equivalence to be demonstrated at a high level and to be ongoing as well within that space. So it's going to be very important again for the institution to create that environment. So I'm just going to swap sharing. To highlight these elements. So again, we need ongoing and purposeful investment, and it's the institution's responsibility to require the staff to demonstrate these things and also to provide meaningful and supported opportunities. And the best way to demonstrate this is to have, again, policies or plans that can be submitted. And quite often these are very brief, and they only have to be very brief to do this. So for example, for contemporary, for knowledge of contemporary developments in the field, it could be a seminar series or supporting staff to engage with research or scholarship within these areas. For education, it could be having education workshops or having a guest program where you've got different educators come into the institution to run workshops, etc. And for the qualification, again, a program that can do that. I've just lost my slides. They will just come back up again very shortly.
I've been given a bunny by a puppy dog. Here, you can have it back.
Andrew, are you here on Gold Coast today?
No, I'm in Melbourne. And so if you're
Not
talking
coming? Yeah. I was hoping there'll be more people today on the Gold Coast, but I think there's only just a few.
I'll be there tomorrow.
Sorry for that interruption with the slides dropping out. So the first point is that the institution needs to create the processes, the policies, etc., to provide these opportunities. But also, and this is a point that you've also noted through these discussions, is that there's a definite need to translate this into the student's experience, and particularly within their formal learning environments, that this scholarship and learning, that this skills that we're developing for our learning and teaching, the knowledge of contemporary developments in our field, that the skills of learning and teaching, our qualifications, need to be translated into the classroom, basically. That the student's experience needs to be influenced by this. And what this is generally seen as inherent, but it's often important to make that explicit as well.
And how is that evidenced? That is difficult.
Quilts. That's one
Quilts?
that we just recently used. You know, for the teacher quality.
Yeah.
Then you got your cells or whatever you guys want to call them for the student experience survey. But the other third thing that we did use is we actually did an independent reporting. Looked and compared those data sets, but across other spectrums. So not just pertaining to just the generic questions that we were asking in the cells or anything like that. But definitely because you have to utilize that data. It needs to be data driven output. You can't
That's right. But
just poof it up.
The data can be influenced by lots of different things. So what I'm wondering is, how can you say that this particular small intervention and has an outcome further down the line, given that there are usually so many different things going on? Yeah.
So there's potentially two other avenues for this as well. One is to having formal processes for module renewal. And it might be required that modules need to be updated within a certain time frame. And that within those that they need to be informed by contemporary developments in the field.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is more institutional settings that we've got there. And then again, when that process is, so when this module comes up for renewal, that there's a demonstration that the information from this event that I've been to, that this research that I've undertaken has informed this process.
Yeah.
And then also, so that is more about contemporary developments within the field of discipline. And then also for the contemporary skills in teaching, learning and assessment. For example, if we did go to Andrew's, and we should all go to Andrew's workshop on authentic assessment, that there is a demonstration that the assessment is more authentic afterwards, or that we've implemented the learnings from that authentic assessment workshop by modifying our assessment program, for example. So thinking that it's important, yes, as Anastasia has noted, to get the student feedback, but also those other elements. But it's also important that we have the processes in place to both to require this and be able to demonstrate that this is something that we've embedded within our institutional practice. So importantly, we need staff to be able to demonstrate they've got contemporary knowledge of the discipline and the field, that they've got contemporary skills in teaching, learning and assessment, and they've got a qualification in a relevant discipline. And again, that there's probably less of an issue for most of us. And it's those first two, which generally we need to have institutional processes in place to making sure that it's being developed, but it's also an ongoing aspect as well. So what have we done today? We looked at the context, which was the standards, and we identified that the staffing is one of the standards, well, actually it's a substandard 3.2 within it, but it's also an important one, and it's one that can be challenging within that space. And we saw through the application of this fictitious institution, the Academy of Tourism and Hospitality, that within even a small program of 8 modules within a Bachelor of Tourism degree, when we're looking at the assessment, that it highlighted the nuance of things that we're looking for. It highlighted potentially the need for explicit demonstration of these elements. And it also highlighted not only the ability to demonstrate them, but the need to have these elements within that space. From that, we could see that it's not just about cutting staff out of this, out of the teaching within the space, but it's important that we have plans to develop staff so that they can demonstrate these outcomes. And that's going to be really important now, but also into the future, that because of the need to demonstrate contemporary and ongoing across these elements, that our plans for our immediate priorities can be actioned, but those are short-term. It's the long-term plans for staff development, which are really important within this space and for us to action. And so from this, hopefully, we've got a conversant understanding of staff sufficiency characteristics. And we talked about them across 3 areas: about the contemporary knowledge, or the knowledge of contemporary developments within our discipline or field, We talked about them in the skills, contemporary skills with teaching, learning and assessment. And we talked about them within having a qualification and or equivalence based on academic or professional practice. We looked at applying the sufficiency criteria to assess an institutional staff profile. And particularly in that we saw the distinctions between those three elements, but also what sort of criteria and the diversity of criteria that could potentially demonstrate each of those three standards or not. We looked at prioritising immediate actions to identify where we could address gaps through one process, which was alignment of staff and their profile to the modules that they're teaching. And then the second one was through oversight. In other words, having staff that would supervise staff without all three of these elements that could get us through that immediate period. But we also identified that those immediate actions are short-term, and more important is about creating the overall staff profile for their sufficiency and making sure we've got plans which are both going to institutionalize or formalize these processes within our institution, require staff to engage in them, but also demonstrate how these have then informed the teaching and learning for our students within that context. Is anyone unsure if you've achieved one of these outcomes or have got any questions or comments in regards to what we've talked about thus far?
It's been great. Yeah, I've learned so much. I've made pages of notes.
Yeah, we are more critical now. Yeah.
Yeah, more critical and more. I mean, it's seeing it in the big picture of how do you develop this? Okay, this is the snapshot of what's happening right now, but in the interests of continual enhancement, development, and improvement, these immediate actions need to be focused on addressing the sufficiency in the staff profile across those areas. It's just, yeah. Also for ourselves as well, because it helps, you know, I look at myself too, like where are my gaps? I mean, I'm ancient, so, you know, yeah.
And very importantly through this process, hopefully what you've seen is that this will highlight areas where we do need action, but our emphasis is always on that development of our colleagues in our overall teaching, and providing formal structures and processes to ensure that the whole team is able to demonstrate the standards within this space.
And if you ever need any operational inspiration, I would say, you know, in terms of how do you incorporate that, I would always recommend looking at TAFE sector, a vocational sector, because it's part of the law. They have to, every single teacher that comes into a classroom, regardless of what they teach, they have to demonstrate that currency, as they call it. And it's a pretty intensive process for them to prove that they are current. And they do it really well from that operational perspective, so much so that all teachers like forced to sort of do it. It's a second nature to them. They come in and they, you know, update themselves, and then they deploy appropriate measures to make sure that they are current.
Yes.
No, that's great. Yeah. And we see TAFE also, you know, that TAFE deliver the bachelor program as well, which is with a very low price. This is one of the competitor.
Yes.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn.
I think for deep dive into it, and then which has been more confident. Yeah, I'm doing it, but I'm not aware so critical for the current teachings, which is proficiencies and other thing. We just thought that if you have a postgrad that most people have a postgrad in learning and teaching, just tick the box, done. But in fact, it needs to be updated. Yeah, not because I had it a couple of years ago, which is about 10 years ago already, and then it's our plate. But yeah, attending which is a professional development, and other thing that could be useful for it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and especially again, thank you, Mika, for preparing the all the CVs for today and the institution.
Glenn, can I just ask a question? And this may have perhaps been asked before. What's actually your experience with the certificate for training and assessment as part of validating one's ability or being currency in terms of their teaching?
So generally we were seeing the certificate for as a training qualification rather than an education for higher education or for degrees and the like. So it's a good indication that staff have engaged in those areas, but we're generally looking for obviously not only the certificate, but hopefully some form of training within, or at least some form of training within the higher education context as compared to the vocational.
Yeah, I think Cert 4 is more for the vet.
It not necessarily. If you have one, you would recognize that it's actually a lot more useful than some of the grads.
Oh yes, of course. I agree. I agree.
But it gives you like a rounded experience, and so I just wanted to see what's the experience that you may have had in terms of linking that to a scholarly, register. Not as obviously an encompassing, tick, yes, but a minor component of something.
Yep, so definitely it'd be a component, but I would be looking to see that there's been some further engagement with some training within the higher education specific space to complement that. Naomi, your insight on that one?
Yeah, I think it's about trying to draw that line between vet or, that, as you said, that practical training as opposed to teaching and learning. And I think they're quite particular about that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that we do that brings the life skills and support that probably they don't formally recognise. So you'd sort of maybe put them a bit further down the list, I guess.
And also for Cert 4, it requires updating. I think somebody with Cert 4 about, let's say about 5-6 years ago, they require now literacy and other component of it as well. So it requires update with certificate for in teaching and assessment.
For the vocational sector, they do 100%. Like that's the mandatory requirement for them for anybody to teach anything. But it still provides more arguably value compared to, as I said, some of our grad certs that are out there floating out and about.
Oh yeah.
And I'll have no comment on the quality of other institutions and their qualifications. So next year we've got a next workshop is in February, and it's immediately preceding the Calthy conference. So it's on the Tuesday, the 6th of February, immediately before the conference, and it's going to be a full day workshop. And we'll be focusing on another key area which has been identified by the college, which is about establishing and demonstrating content and learning activities, and particularly looking at demonstrating that the students are engaged with advanced knowledge and inquiry. So this is on Tuesday the 6th. It's going to be the full day. It will be at the conference venue. We will have a break around about the middle of the workshop where we'll collaborate with the PhD ECR mentoring session, which is also being held on that day at the same venue as well, so that we can participate in their mentoring program. So that's a workshop that we're very much looking forward to, and we're also very much looking forward to seeing you all in person. It's been a long time since we've had one of these workshops in person. So we're very much looking forward to doing that.
So good.
And of course, make sure that within your institutions that you'd speak to your the people in charge of the money and say that this is a professional development requirement for your education training, which meets your Texas standards.
That's right.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
I've put a description in the chat.
Thanks, Mika. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. Can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah.
Naomi.
No, it'll be good. Yeah.
And so finally to close, thank you again, Mika. Thank you to all of you for your engagement and your attendance, and also the wonderful questions and points that you've noted from both your own experience, from your institutional experience, but also thinking about how this might reflect in different places as well. It's been really, really valuable. And I've found it excellent opportunity within the space, and I hope you have as well. And again, we just look forward to seeing you in person in February.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I've learned so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been really helpful.
Thank you.